to order at 7:34 p.m. Good evening, fellow commissioners and the general public. My name is Mike Champness. I'm the chair of the Transportation Advisory Commission. Before we begin, please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the county website and on YouTube. Conduct this meeting wholly electronically, and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by the new state legislation and FOIA, the Transportation Advisory Commission needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of this commission is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all the other members. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. I'm asking each commission member participating in this meeting to state your name and location from which you are participating when I mention your name. At large, Linda Sperling. I know she's not here this evening. Unfortunately, her father's in the hospital, so she has some things she has to do in Delaware. We wish her and her father the best, of course. Braddock District, Kevin Morris.
From Burke, Virginia.
Thank you, Kevin. Draysville District, Mike Champness. I'm here. I hope folks can hear me. Hunter Mill District, Kelly Westenhoff.
Kelly Westenhoff. I'm here in Reston.
Thank you, Kelly. Mason District, Roger Hoskin. Roger, I saw you there. Can you unmute, Roger? Let us know you're here.
Yeah.
Okay.
If he takes off his headphones, it'll probably work.
I can hear you. All right, Mount Vernon District, Pete Sidnick.
Pete Sidnick, I'm in the Mount Vernon District.
Thank you. Lee District, Alexis Glenn.
Alexis Glenn here in Alexandria.
Thank you, Alexis. Appreciate you joining us. Providence District, Jeremy Hancock.
Jeremy Hancock in Falls Church.
Okay. Springfield District, Eric Thiel.
Here in Fairfax Station.
Fantastic. Join us. And Sully District, David Scotts. Okay, none from David. And Fairfax Area Disability Services Board and our Vice Chair, Mary Pauline Jones.
I am present from the wonderful town of Herndon.
Fantastic. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the aforementioned Vice Chair Mary Pauline Jones, so that may he be heard to make the requisite motion.
Thank you. I accept the virtual gavel. I now recognize Commissioner Chanis.
Thank you. I move that we have determined that each member's voice can be heard adequately, and it is so moved that I've determined each member's voice can be adequately heard by the other commissioners.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I believe that was Roger that did that second.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Is there a discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Let's do that. Any opposed? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. I next move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this commission to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. I further move that this commission may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by WebEx online platform or by calling 1-415-655-0001 or 1-844-621-3956, toll free, and entering the access code 179-976-2279. Phone number for ADA is 711. Access information is also available at the TAC website, Fairfax County Government website. It is so moved.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. Finally, I move that all the matters on the agenda previously furnished and posted on the TAC website are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations in the discharge of the Commission's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. I so move.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Roger again. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you very
I
much.
pass back the virtual gavel.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Jones. We will now start the TAC business per the approved agenda. I have no opening remarks. And so we'll move on then to welcoming the public and guests. Obviously, Calvin, as always, we're very grateful for you to be here. Our esteemed panelist, Stephen Giardetti, who will introduce in just a moment. Michael Riddle, Brent Riddle, thank you so much for participating as well. I don't think I've missed anybody on the screen here. Are there any folks on dial-in that would like to identify themselves and be recognized? Okay. The next item of business is to accept the meeting minutes. Unfortunately, we still do not have the November meeting minutes, and we had a procedural hiccup with the December meeting minutes. This is a bit of a challenge for us. Has always been a challenge. It's the least popular thing we do here. Everybody recoils in horror from having to do the minutes. I was front and center in that feeling when I was doing the minutes previously. We're going to have to do them shortly. Pete, appreciate you putting the minutes together. We just need a little bit more time to have some time to review them and brush them up and compare them and things like that. I don't want to talk about it now, but we'll deal with that later. Figure out a way to come up with something that we can sustain consistently. So unfortunately, we do not have meeting minutes on either November or December meetings right now to approve. It will be my one of my top priorities to have that done by the February meeting. So with that, I wanted to move on to our primary topic of this evening. Before I introduce Stephen, who we know from who's recently enough to come visit us, I think it was back in June when many of us were here, certainly in July. I lose track of how things go during the pandemic. But as many of you recall, most of you recall, at Kevin's suggestion, we were looking very carefully. We wanted to talk about One Fairfax and the Fairfax connector. Unfortunately, we were not able to get any of the Fairfax connector folks for this meeting. They are going to be available the next meeting. We decided for a variety of reasons, one of which was also availability of One Fairfax, to keep those two things together. So we'll talk about that at the next meeting, and we'll talk about that in the upcoming meeting schedule. So I did want to acknowledge that this is not quite what we had anticipated at the last meeting, but of course, I'm sure you've seen the agenda, and we very much welcome Stephen to come back and talk to us. As you recall, when Stephen was here before, he was kind enough to talk to us about the Silver Line development. I thought it was very illuminating. One of my big takeaways from that is I think it's important for us to understand the economic development strategies that are happening across the county as we look at complementary transportation activities. Stephen and the EDA has been working on a Route 1 economic development study. Stephen's been kind enough to come to us this evening, even though it's next month that they'll be presenting the results to the board. So there will be no sort of premature recommendation, so to speak, but actually I welcome the opportunity here for us to hear about the work in progress, offer some suggestions, perhaps ask some questions that hopefully will inform Stephen's later presentation and any further work he might do over the next month. And so with that, what I'd like to do is I turn it over to Stephen. Thanks very much again for participating here, and we look very forward to hearing how things are going down the Route 1 corridor.
Yes, thank you, Michael. And thank you all for giving me this platform and time to speak on the subject. First, I'm going to try to work my technical magic and see if I can share my screen here with the appropriate presentation. I know it was shared before. Let's see if we get this. Okay. Okay. Well, again, good evening, and thank you all for having me on again. I know last time, I share your sentiment, Michael. It seems like it was years ago, but I believe it was in the summer. We talked about the economic impact of the Silver Line. During that time, the EDA and our consultant were in the midst of a Richmond Highway market assessment study, and that's with our consultants, Partners for Economic Solutions. But I want to rewind even further before that and go back to before the pandemic in November 2019, when the EDA's president, Victor Hoskins, met with Supervisor Lusk and Supervisor Stork to learn about the landscape of the Route 1 corridor. As you may or may not know, our president started last August, so he was still trying to get the lay of the land. And as they were describing the Embark Richmond plan and the plus $1 billion infrastructure plan going behind that, we decided to collaborate with the county on a market assessment study. So what we need to do is we need to consider what the impacts of a 9-station BRT are, as well as many new tourist attractions such as the Army Museum of Fort Belvoir, and even the future Amazon HQ2 campus. What will this have effect on not just 5, but 10 years out for development? So after the RFP process, we selected a DC-based firm, Partners for Economic Solutions, able to address those questions and others within the following study area. This group performed a similar study for the Columbia Pike Corridor in Arlington, and they also did many other BRT studies, like in downtown Orlando. So we felt very comfortable building off of their past experience. The consultants, so they spent the next 2 months meeting with as many departments, associations, and other stakeholders as possible, surveying the corridor and just really sponging up as much data as possible. But one thing to consider as they were assembling the landscape of Richmond Highway was the impact of COVID on existing business. So that's why they had to do this full landscape discovery in April and May, and then they also redid that work again in September. So it was almost like they were doing 2 separate studies. So after taking to account those existing conditions, future projections, challenges for future development, they were able to determine near and long-term development projections during the fall. From there, they took past BRT studies and delivered a structured set of recommendations for the county to implement. That's what they're working on finalizing right now before we move to present to the public in February and the Board of Supervisors. And they're really doing that to just make sure that when these new BRT stations are built out and the properties start trading hands, they know exactly what process to use and the best process going forward. So phase build out of the BRT, right away acquisition begin this year. South from Huntington to Gum Springs in the first phase. And as of now, the BRT is planned to function, which I think in full revenue service by 2030. So we will begin with the actual study area, and I know you should have within that, but I first wanted to point out what the existing landscape looked like, and also the overlapping demographics. So you can see there's a lot of broken up areas, but the consultants use these broken up areas to illustrate where these certain areas were pulling in for demand, not just for retail, but office and hospitality. So they drew up these trade areas and broke them down and started grouping things like Huntington and North Gateway with Pendle, and then also the South County Center and Woodlawn together. But across the full study area, have over 9,000 existing rental units, 1.4 million square feet of office, and 3.3 million square feet of retail. Like I was saying, the good news with the retail market is, as of now, it's currently very healthy. The vacancy rate has remained below 10%, and not much inventory has been added. So in essence, the market has generally figured out who it is serving. The local neighborhood and commuters who utilize Route 1 to pick up essential goods and comparatively shop between department stores is a big one. And these strong institutional owners of some of these larger retail centers, they have good steady streams of income going in. And then the other retail owners are some of your smaller mom and pop buildings. And a lot of times they're able to fill up that space and keep collecting rent. So they don't have really the incentive to redevelop that and have apartments above future retail. But I will say that initially the demand for new retail does not seem high going forward. So it'll be really extremely important for the county and the stakeholders around the area to retain the current retailers, but also amidst this pandemic, provide technical assistance for legacy businesses as new development comes along.
Excuse me one moment. This is
Sure.
Mary Helene. The occupancy rate that you mentioned, as of what date is that under 10%?
That was, as I know this date shows 2018, but even as of 2020, it was below, or the vacancy rate was below 10%.
Vacancy, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
And that, when you say as
That
of
was
2020,
pre-pandemic. Yeah.
okay, that was what I was trying to just check on. Okay.
Got it.
Stephen, do you have, I know it's the obvious question, and I can't help but to ask it, some figures for pandemic as well? Is that something you're trying to pull together to put in? Because obviously the world so changed that that's one of the big things that everybody's concerned about.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I don't have the specific numbers, but I know our consultants, as they were doing this study, they really complimented Fairfax County's RISE grant program for keeping those existing retailers in business and providing that technical assistance. So they really said when they did the first, as they call it, windshield survey in April of all of the retailers along the corridor, and then they came back in September and October to look at that data, not much had changed, but that was before this latest surge in December. And, although we're ending the report now, that might tell a little bit of a different story. But between that time period when they did those two reviews, there really wasn't much change in the amount of the retailers that went, or the vacancy rate that came across for retail. So as far as when we pivot to office, I know there's a lot of intrigue there with a metro stop in the future. BRT said, there should be, some of these similar office product that you see in Alexandria or coming up in Tysons or along the Silver Line because of the proximity to Amazon HQ2. But I will certainly point out that if you look at it in similar areas or closer proximity to DC and Amazon HQ2, you have currently 100% vacant office buildings off of Eisenhower East that are still looking to be filled up. So to think that there might be that 250,000, 300,000 square foot office building that will sprout up in, especially within the next 5 years is not really the reality within this market. But that's not to say that there isn't currently also a healthy office market along the corridor. There hasn't been much development since the early 2000s. That the total office inventory is around 1.4 million, and it's stayed that way for a while. But the current office space knows its market, where it's your lawyers, your physical therapists, your neighborhood serving office tenants that are amongst some of those mid-scale office buildings. So I think one of the focuses that's going to be on future office development is to sort of take some of these smaller office tenants, but with great growth potential, and really nurse them, or using more of that incubation role going forward to grow them here instead of just going and trying to fish for that big whale out of market to land in the office space. So next month on February 16th, and I have the link at the end of the presentation, so please take a look at that. And if you can join, it's at February 16th at 9:30. We'll be showing the final results of that, and you'll see the projections on office, and they're moderate, but they're really focused primarily, first and foremost, around the Huntington Metro stop, and that's due to the visibility along the Beltway, and also being close to an existing metro stop.
Stephen, if I could ask a quick question. I
Sure.
know it's back it's kind of in the Wayback Machine there a little bit, but the big dip in 2011, do you know what caused that?
Yeah, so that ended up the impending future office development that followed along right after the Great Recession is when we saw a lot of office that was in the pipeline pivot to apartments because that's where the hot property and that's where the available financing was. So that's why you saw, especially across the county, tons of office that was planned in the development. And I know this isn't necessarily the subject area, but Chantilly had over 10 million square feet of office planned for there. And then once that hit, you saw a lot of those plans pivot to apartments. So that's when you really saw the slowdown of office. And then you couple that with the impending BRAC realignment and taking some of that office demand that would have been scattered along Route 1. And also, we saw the biggest hit come for Crystal City for office vacancy. So there were office buildings that were, it just built on the competition as the vacancy shot up in Arlington, especially at being closer proximity to DC. So that also, it's just like that, it really just like hasn't hit its stride yet for developing down to Route 1 corridor, but we definitely see potential and maybe possibly some smaller spin-offs from the Amazon HQ2 space, but that's in the longer term.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen, can you touch on that net absorption rate?
Yeah, so basically what net absorption does is year by year, it'll take a look at if more space was occupied, and this one's specific to the Richmond Highway corridor, or if space was vacated. So I'll take the space that was vacated plus the space that was occupied within that period and measure them against each other. And I think I'm not exactly sure which big move caused this one in 2012, this big shift out of office space, but it's also with such a smaller or a relatively small inventory, around 1 million. If you have a 20,000 square foot user move out, you can really see shifts like that. So it's not necessarily cause for alarm when something like that does come along. It just stands out more because of the nature and the size of the market.
Last year, if you go back a second to that last graph. Yeah. So the absorption rate is barely registering there in 2018. So your net loss on occupancy is minimal. Is that how I would interpret that, or?
Yeah, you can see where this would be sort of like a trailing indicator after that space was either occupied or vacated. And then so you can see, like, as these spaces came in, this line started to go up, and likewise as the spaces were vacated, the occupancy rate would go down.
Okay, I think I've got it. I won't try and overthink it.
And then this following up that the consultant put together, which just took the inventory and essentially broke off the corridor into 3 sections and showed the inventory and the potential inventory that could come down the pipeline. So as you know, right near Huntington Metro is where you're going to see more of that Class A office. Whereas then as you go down the corridor, even though it's a lot less office space to begin with, it's more of that smaller mid-rise office inventory, low-rise office inventory. Some of those are townhouses that are used for office use, or as we call them, converted residential dwellings into office space. So that's what this is sort of setting up shop to show that that demand has showed that it started from the north and gone down to the south for demand in office, and that will likely be the trajectory starting. You're gonna have to see that northern part of the corridor fill up with office space or develop office space before some of the proposed developments further down the corridor start to realize that office development as well.
Stephen, sorry, what's CBC stand for again?
So basically what the real estate community has done is they decided to take the office inventory, and sometimes you'll hear the term trophy office buildings, and that's your glass boxes and, you know, LEED certifications, newly renovated, but they'll break them up based upon criteria like asking office rent, when the last time the building was renovated, how energy efficient it is. It really takes office inventory and places it into these buckets. So Class C would be more of your aged inventory or.
No, I appreciate that. What does CBC stand for?
Oh, sorry. I thought you said C. I didn't.
Sorry.
Community business center. So it was broken up into, Huntington, North Gateway, Pendle, Pablo Valley.
They're
Beacon Grove,
they're like nodes. They're like nodes down the highway that are approximately a quarter mile or a half mile in radius.
That
are designated in the Embark comp plan.
Gotcha.
Oh, and I also wanted to mention on the previous slide, that dip in 2012 that went back up in 2013 may have been if a 20,000 square foot retail development could cause that dip, it was probably Costco opening. They opened it in 2013 on Richmond Highway.
Okay.
Probably one business alone probably jacked the chart way back up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll make sure to make a note. Yeah, I know this was for the office consideration. So I'm wondering. I'll get back to everyone on that. I'll try to get through that. But
Stephen, before you move ahead, even though you listed, you have Woodlawn listed, does it fall into the South County Center breakdown on office space? Not office space, but Class C?
Yeah, it's grouped up into that.
So South County and Woodlawn then, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. And good to see you, Pete. Pete, I've met with Pete a couple of times already with our consultants. So
good to see you too.
Have had great feedback throughout this process.
There you go.
So another thing that Partners for Economic Solutions looked at was the hotel inventory. And again, pre-pandemic, there were very high or healthy occupancy rates, both above or all around throughout the corridor above 70%. But they decided when they were looking into this information to break out the inventory into some of your higher end hotels or some of the motels, the 1-stories that could have alternate uses at time. And then again, your chain hotels, your Hampton Inns, your Quality Suites or Quality Inn Suites. And really broke out the inventory on when it was built and why we might not see much development coming forward. One thing is obviously COVID-19 pandemic, especially within the next 2 years, won't see much demand hotel within that. But another thing that could affect, especially for Route 1 corridor for future hotel development, is the National Harbor and that hotel site being that proximate to that site. So it's outside competition that may limit some of the hotel development that comes along the Route 1 corridor. And the fact that we've seen most of the hotel development along the southern portion of the corridor throughout the 10 years and being able to support the Fort Belvoir base shows that it still needs to settle in, and it's healthy right now, but it's not calling for much more as far as keys go.
Stephen, isn't Belvoir continuing to grow? Fort Belvoir?
Yes, it is. Yeah, thank you, Kevin. They recently opened up the National Army Museum, so that's another tourist attraction on site. But they are also keeping and housing and building office and hotel, and also expanding on the commissary on that site as well. So that does take away from some of the future demand that comes across these property types, and should be considered, especially on some of those southern portions of that corridor when considering future development.
So they have hotel on site at Belvoir?
Yeah, they have a form of lodging on there.
Okay,
Yeah.
but that's not, you can't,
Or
I
not,
mean,
sorry, not like like I did like visitor lodging.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, got it, thanks.
And this is just showing if there is going to be any future hotel development near term. It's most likely going to happen in the northern cluster. These are very healthy occupancy rates pre-pandemic, but again, some of the competition may give developers a second thought on that. But when hotel development comes, it's going to start right around Huntington. To begin with, and I believe in the initial plans for the Huntington Club development does call for some keys. So like I said, I wanted to make sure I was more so focusing on the landscape, and then just some like higher level notes on what the development is, without ruining the surprise that'll be coming February 16th for everyone. I hope you all can join. Again, I added the link in here. It's open to the public. The Board of Supervisors, the Economic Advisory Commission will be on there. So you'll see all the future near-term and long-term demand projections for the corridor. And I just want to thank you all for having me on again, and open up the floor if there's any questions or any additional questions.
Thank you, Stephen, very much. Please, commissioners, feel free to, Alexis, I see your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to ask about a comment you made towards the beginning. You said that in the corridor, Stephen, thanks so much again for the presentation. I appreciate the information, and I hope I can make the February 16th meeting. We'll see how work pans out that day. You said that that retail is steady, but there's a low demand for new retail, which we can insinuate means there's a low motivation for redevelopment along the corridor. And I'm wondering if you are looking at conclusions you might be able to draw on how that relates to the Embark comp plan amendment, where they're trying to encourage higher density development along the corridor, and sort of laying out the carpet for private owners to say, we're making it easy for you to redevelop and bring more density. Does this mean that we're not going to see the property owners respond to that situation in the near term or the medium term?
So I think one of the issues with retail and just how it plays into redevelopment in the near term is some of the largest parcels along the corridor are existing retailers, and like I said, under institutional ownership that know what they're doing as far as operating and collecting income and having the right retail mix and knowing their demographics. So for instance, like BF Saul and Federal Realty Investment Trust, if they don't have the incentive to take on such a large scale development project, or that development project doesn't underwrite, or they don't want to take all the chances to add on multifamily that they're going to have to add on as another layer on top of redeveloping retailers and deciding which ones to retain, or negotiating how that process works out, then they're probably going to keep the things the way they are if those income streams are coming in. So one of the biggest things that the recent county program, the economic incentive program, I think it's great, because one of the development challenges for the corridor is you don't have a lot of those large pieces or parcels that would make a developer say, yeah, this writes out and I'm going to put an apartment building over retail. They're already seeing it with the South Alex project So like it's kind of like few and far between, and even that is starting in the northern corridor. But if those retailers, if the checks are coming every month from their tenant mix, and they're not finding much of an incentive to knock down that project, lose that income stream, and then redevelop, and also work out something where they're going to be renting out those units, then you kind of need to give them that final push. And maybe that the economic incentive program where they can there could be a provided assemblage, and they can have just a little bit more room to work with, or an extra 5 acres added on to that parcel. That would push them over the edge. But so far the development over the past 5 years has not shown their willingness to do that. So that's just where that hesitancy came from with the consultants on future retail demand.
If I could just throw one other piece in there, Alexis, then I'll let you turn it back to you if you've got more questions. Stephen, this sounds pretty similar, although not exactly similar to Tyson's, where there's a large number of quite honestly the auto dealers and things like that. They're making money. They see no reason to move. I'm not going to be so cavalier as to suggest the incentives or whatever in Tyson's are the same as Route 1, but are there maybe some lessons learned from the Tyson's area that we can apply to Route 1 to encourage transformation where we think it might be helpful?
I will say one thing that the consultants will stress and have stressed is making sure the community during the redevelopment process, during the right-of-way acquisition, during the BRT build-out, is making sure that every step is being carefully communicated to the community, and working hand in hand with them and the stakeholders along the corridor, and the stakeholders who know the area best. So not necessarily because Tyson, they're still trying to figure that out in Tyson's. I mean, you have along Leesburg Pike, you have those car dealerships laid out along there. So, but as far as future development goes, and for making sure that as many people are as happy as possible and can be as prosperous as possible, it's really just a focus on communication and informing the public. And even in across multiple languages, they had one suggestion that you'll see in the presentation is that like everything that's communicated from the county's end going down, if it's in English, also just do something as simple as put in a Spanish translation in there and make sure you're reaching as many people as possible and carefully communicating this and looking for input.
Thanks. Alexis, did I interrupt a conversation? Do you have another question?
No, not at all. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Please,
Steve, do you have any idea what time that presentation will be? Because those BOS meetings can run all day, right?
Yeah, so it's the 9:30 meeting. We're 100% on the agenda. We're still trying to find out where we shake on that. I'm happy to send out a message to the governor and Michael once that's confirmed. But I could also put whoever wants to be on an email list where we'll update on the finalization going forward.
Yeah, if you send it to Calvin, he'll send it out to us. Would be good.
Okay, great.
does anybody have any thoughts about what the population growth in that corridor is? Has it been fairly stable, or going up, or going down? That's probably one of the corridors with some of the most relatively affordable housing in the whole county. And also in terms of income, probably isn't as well off as Tyson's corner.
Yeah, they looked at demographics and future population and even recent growth, and for the most part, the population growth tracked with the rest of the county, which isn't necessarily. It's not bad because you are growing, but it's not necessarily a great thing because the growth pace has slowed down tremendously over the 2010s. I think in the earlier 2000s and right around 2010, Fairfax County and the region as a whole really hit its stride for population growth, but that number keeps trending downward on the growth, and they're still growing, but a lot of that is just net from families growing and also international migration. The domestic migration, we've been losing decent numbers on that to more affordable areas.
Hey, Stephen, these combined community business centers, one of the things that would probably help answer the population growth is a lot of it, even though it's supposed to be business centers, they're going to be, in theory, residential above the businesses. So that would, generate a whole lot more density. Was in this combined, community business centers. So, yeah, is that taken into effect for long term, or is this just a snapshot of today?
Yeah, this is just a snapshot of today, but I completely agree on the when it does work for a developer, and you can, because there is a shortage of housing availabilities, and it's recognized by the county and its affordable housing task force. So to add on to the inventory while keeping affordable housing in mind, which the consultants didn't really touch on affordable housing. They mainly stuck on housing projections. And those I can send over to the group, because that was more part of the landscape. I want to stick to the commercial construction, but I obviously understand that goes hand in hand with the housing projections. So I can provide a little bit more data on that. But overall, as far as serving the CBCs, especially in the immediate proximity to each BRT stop, will be pivotal, and also providing some affordable housing options.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have other questions, commissioners? Who's that, please? Kelly.
Yeah. Stephen, thanks for the presentation. I'm the newest person on this, so I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around everything that we covered. But in Tyson's, there's the Tyson's Partnership, which is, a consortium of the developers, and they have a pretty good seat at the table to talk about the overall development. Now, this is a much more stretched out area in some ways, and distinct pockets of, well, as you well know. But is there anything like that, a Tyson's Partnership or a group that can have the development at all places along the corridor, from the developer's point of view, speaking with kind of the same voice and the same goals?
There have been probably not something to the level of Tyson's Partnership, and it's tough to compare the two just based upon not only the differences in demographics and existing commercial inventory, but also the fact that Tyson's is very young in its development still, and trying to figure out what its identity is. But I do know that the Mount Vernon Chamber has worked on some keeps informed with these groups. I don't know about how tied they are with each of the developers, but after we give the presentation, the EDA gives our consultants give the presentation on February 16th. We'll be doing a series of information series that will break down each of the pockets and trade areas within the corridor, and we're inviting developers, business stakeholders, groups, all across all different sectors, government, academia, to participate and be part of the conversation going forward. So I look forward to that, and that'll kick off in March.
There is the Southeast Fairfax Development Corporation, which is akin to the Tyson's Partnership. nonprofit organization. I think they have a partner, some sort of relationship with the county where they get some funding from the county to bring businesses together for various reasons. But yeah, definitely not at the scale of Tyson's partnership.
So do you get a sense of, and the same thing for Stephen, do you get a sense of North Corridor and South Corridor competing, or they just are they going for different goals? I mean, everybody wants more money coming in, but is it a different population that they're trying to serve, like hotels going into DC versus hotels supporting Belvoir?
I think I think it just plays out, or it will play out, as it's got to be unified for how this development is going to occur, starting from the Huntington Metro, and then delivering the first phase of the BRT that'll go down to Gum Springs, followed by the second phase that'll go down to Woodlawn. It'll naturally be in order, especially because the magnitude of a Metro rail stop like Huntington that the development will be focused around. But the whole community throughout the corridor should be, involved in that process. So I don't really see it as, I mean, other people on this call might have differences of opinion. So far, right now, I don't see it that segmented where it's those two ends are competing, so to speak.
If I may, Stephen, I believe that Stephen's exactly right, because I know the Chamber of Commerce, which I play with, and the Mount Vernon Council of Citizens, we're looking really to develop the whole corridor. Now, different CBCs have been identified for different sorts of things. Woodlawn, way down to the south, that's supposed to be somewhat of a historical center. Where you move up the line, it goes to more heavy retail and heavy dense population. So each one's in theory different, but it really will come down to the, hopefully Steve will agree, it'll really come down to the incentives that builders and developers have to hit one of these places and make it better.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think everyone throughout the corridor has the same goal of prosperity, not like competing in priorities, but also understands the realities of where the development's going to happen first, just because of market forces.
Yep.
Thank you. Are there other questions? If not, I did want to point something out, and this is Stephen, not necessarily, well, it's not a direct connection. It might be that National Landing, of course, which is Crystal City, Pentagon City, Potomac Yards, and the Amazon campus, is touting itself as a sort of a transportation hub of stupendous proportions. 8 transportation projects underway in the area, all sorts of multimodal activities and things like that. Just wanted to mention it just as sort of something in somewhat proximity. Not sure there's any kind of connection in terms of drawing a connection to Amazon there. I know it's something that we've been thinking about. But I'm just kind of wondering, do you think there's any draw or opportunities from Amazon that might be able to help us influence activities down the Route 1 corridor?
Are you talking about as like spin-off space or like future development potential, or?
Well, I'll admit my first thought is one of transportation, which could be too facile and not really of any connection. But they're talking about being very multimodal connected there, and we're talking about improving our multimodal connections. The Route 1 corridor is closer to Amazon in some parts of the county. And so I just wondered if there's any opportunities. I may just be planting a seed that is quickly dismissed, but I did just want to mention it because there might be a draw there. I can send the article to the TAC members here, just to sort of look at. But I'm just wondering if there's if that sort of has come up in any of the work of the consultant, any thoughts about connections to Amazon or anything like that.
as far as connections to Amazon, it's mostly been focused on what development potentials from spinoff, from housing projections. I mean, I would yield to you all, the experts on the transportation side on it, but I think that what they're saying is we're not going to realize the impacts from Amazon HQ2 until longer term, 10 plus years out. And that's due not only to the development that's infilling there, but sort of as what I alluded to before, is there's a metro stop that's before Huntington. And there's also the Alexandria infill that's been just built up higher for higher density. And there are still some prime development opportunities there. So it's almost like you have to let them play first a little bit when realizing that development. But I think down the road, you'll definitely see, I think you'll see an effort for collaboration across jurisdictions that'll prove to be beneficial to the Route 1 corridor.
Yeah, I think taking Amazon out of the discussion, just marketing it as the connection to DCA, the connection to Crystal City. Crystal City's VRE station is planning to redevelop as essentially a Union Station of Arlington. They're trying to compete with Union Station and be the Virginia hub of train transportation and a connection to an airport. And so keeping that in mind, I think keeping the possibility in mind that, you know, I live across the street from the Huntington Metro. I can get to a gated National Airport in 30 minutes. I've done it multiple times. It's insanely how amazingly how quick and easy and cheap it is. You know, and that's, I think, the story we need to tell. And
Okay, appreciate that. And Alexis, as you're saying, which is the one now that's trying to compete with Union Station? Is it National Airport or Huntington?
The Crystal City VRE station, which is, if they ever build that pedestrian bridge, is walkable to the airport.
Okay. Well, you know, one article doesn't make a plan, but certainly there's a lot of those thinking along those lines. Something that obvious, you would think they probably would, but no, I appreciate you pointing that out. That's helpful. If there are no other questions, I did just want to make an observation here, and that is, you know, I'm pleased that we're able to sort of look under the hood a little bit at some of the economic development activities. Certainly, folks who live down the area are you know, more attuned to this than your average commissioner. There's something we all need to be aware of as we look at transportation priorities and things like that. One of the things that struck me, and Steve, when you're answering a question, they're talking about the importance of communicating with community leaders and things like that. You look at what was going on out at the Silver Line there. I won't say you can't screw it up, but there's certainly large economic forces there that are driving the development around the Silver Line that allows for some, if mistakes are made, that you can recover from. You know, down Route 1, I won't say one mistake will kill you, far from it, but we need to be more mindful of what happens there. We have been, we've looked at BRT in the past, I'm sure we will again. But I think that this is, again, part of that importance of kind of knowing the area to know that we need to be perhaps especially respectful of, you know, the impacts that some of the things we're thinking about and talking about might have. And because, you know, if we, you know, do something wrong, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, what I will say, Michael, one last point is I keep talking about the northern development and going down to the south, but and some like the slower turn. But what will expedite the development there is if you do get Huntington area, North Gateway right. I see that, and the consultants see that too as a momentum builder. Because once other developers, institutional owners see the success of a couple of developments right along that northern part of the corridor, you know, that confidence seems to spread pretty easily, and others will start looking on how do I make this work? How do I how do I assemble these properties? And I think you'll see a snowball effect if you get it right the first time around. So I think you're absolutely right. And it's critical that, that we do this first time around.
One more time, if you don't mind, you Mike and Stephen, you're touching right on where I live, of course. And right now I live down near Woodlawn. So we're slow growing right now. But if you drive up Richmond Highway and you get to North Hill, you have hundreds of apartments and townhomes going in. You go just a little bit more, and it looks kind of like Tyson's did just a couple of years ago. There's lots of cranes, there's lots of stuff going on. So we have a lot of, in a very small area, a lot of work going on, and it's going to make a big change. And that already, from the plans that we look at on a regular basis to approve or not approve in the area, there's a whole lot more activity in that area for sure now. And I'm hoping that pushes the growth a little bit more in those areas and down south. So,
it'll get there eventually, yes.
yeah, it'll get there. But I see good things happening really right now.
Okay.
Not enough, but good things happening now. And Stephen, this report you're doing, this is major. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for help crafting it. So appreciate it. And your feedback. All the community stakeholders are extremely important to, again, get it right this time.
Try not to make a mistake, screw it up. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, this was very informative, as always. Again, great to have some context there. We'll add more tools to our quiver, so to speak. We'll talk a little bit about it in the next section on the offside, and eventually, get there and stuff like that. So that, to use an Army term, will eventually, the commission will be an all-up round, and we'll have all the sort of the kind of knowledge that we can navigate more effectively and help make informed recommendations. So this is another important foundation piece there. If there are no other comments or questions, Stephen, once again, appreciate it. One question I'll ask, what's your next economic study, and can we have you back to talk about that?
Well, we have a couple of things in the works. It's still very early to say if it's going to form into something major, but, we are partnering with the county on an economic recovery plan with COVID. I'm touching here and there on that. That seems to be more coming from the Department of Economic Initiatives, but they're working with a consultant, HR Day, who's doing a fantastic job so far. So that's something you might want to look into, and is very timely right now. That's probably the thing that's like next.
That certainly makes sense. Now that the vaccine is starting to be distributed, folks are starting to breathe a little bit easier, at least the ones who've gotten the vaccine. So yeah, it is time to start thinking about it as well. So, and quite honestly, as Stephen, as we talk, we want to have a dialogue and ongoing relationship. We have that here. We really appreciate again you coming. And if there are transportation questions and things like that that you have, you want to sort of socialize, obviously that's the kind of thing we're here. So last couple of times we've invited you, feel free to invite yourself. If there's something that's worthwhile here, come talk to us. And I think I could probably convince my fellow commissioners to let you come on the agenda.
Thank you. I love the open door policy, and I'll take you up on that soon.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Hopefully see everyone February 16th, 9:30. I'll have more information that I'll send over to Calvin, but it's been great chatting with you tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Come again.
Thank you, Stephen.
Okay. Next item is our public comment period. I don't think we have any public here to provide comments, but I will solicit the comments anyway, just in case somebody's on the phone or something like that. Are there any members of the public here that would like to make a comment? Okay. With that, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. We've talked about this a few times in the past. including, of course, at our last meeting, and that is our work plan, priorities development, facilitated working session, AKA what I'm calling the offsite, using business ops speak there. What I've done is, in cooperation with Mary Pauline, is to put together a draft agenda for what we might want to go over. I'll ask you to refer to that here in just a minute, and I'll walk through it. But I will say, and we saw this when Calvin made the announcement, we are on the Board of Supervisors agenda for October 12th, 2021, also 9:30 a.m. Things can change, but as you can tell, they schedule these things well in advance. And so that's definitely an important milestone for us to steer towards. We have plenty of time to get ready. We'll have plenty of conversations with various stakeholders, things like that as we go forward. But that's our big sort of, I guess, sort of debutante ball, so to speak, coming out party, whatever. It's been a while since we've talked to the board. So with that as a backdrop, what I'd ask commissioners to do, please, is to pull up the agenda. Calvin, I can ask you about this. I don't know if it's possible. If not, it's okay. You can tell me. I need to let you know. If you want to put the agenda for the facilitated working session up, you're welcome to. If not, we can walk through it. What I've done here is lay out a Saturday. Calvin has just set out the Survey Monkey there. We're looking between February 13th and March 13th. I think that's 5 weeks that we're looking at right now to find some time to do this. Planning to start with a little bit of a panel discussion, sort of things for us to think about, suggested priorities. As I mentioned at the last meeting when I discussed the conversation that Vice Chair Jones and I had with Walter Alcorn, invited him to address the group. He's open to doing so. Obviously, schedules might prevent, but that he had agreed to do so. Rachel Flynn had also agreed to do so. Tom Bensani is certainly open to the idea. Don't want to put him on the spot. He might want to talk to us later, but certainly I think it's appropriate for us to invite him and get his views as we go forward. And Dale Castello, as many of you recall, was one of the prime movers between the relay activity there for the autonomous vehicle down in the Mosaic District, and has extensive experience in transportation organizations and transportation policy and things like that. So what I would propose to do when we're done here and after this meeting is to extend invitations to these folks to come speak with us. Moving on, the next thing here, and this doesn't necessarily have to be much of a discussion. I show 15 minutes on the agenda here. We talk about it a little bit more now. We can talk about it a little bit more at the next meeting or something like that. These are sort of things to keep in mind, so to speak. That's what I'm calling guiding principles. The fact that there's different complexion of issues, different demographics, different economic capabilities and things like that. Stating the obvious, yes, that's why it might not be important to necessarily talk about them, but want to make sure we have some common understanding about some of the things that we're trying to, that we want to keep in mind as we go forward. And one thing I did want to mention here, and Mary Pauline reminded me of this when we talked earlier, is the goal tonight is not to work these issues. We are not trying to identify the potential guiding principles. We're not trying to identify the specific proposed areas, although what I am trying to do, and I'll move on here in just a minute, is to identify organizational areas, things where we can, bucket activities and things like that. Now, I think we might have a little bit of time this evening to talk a little bit. One of the questions I'll ask the commission, fellow commissioners here at the end of the discussion this evening is whether we think we ought to have a work session prior to our offsite. What I'd like to be able to do is make sure that when we show up on the offsite, whatever day it is, that we're prepared to pretty much hit the ground running. We know what we're going to talk about, some of the issues that we've discussed maybe a little bit. Obviously, commissioners here will have had some time to think about these. I encourage you, I want you, please to send me other things here, for other topics to look at, different ways of organization, things like that. So I'd like to, lay as much groundwork as we can before, so we can be more productive. That said, it's obviously the conversation itself that's going to lead us to some insights there. So what I'll do is I'll go through the agenda and then I will take a breath, offer the opportunity for Mary Pauline to make some comments and then open up the conversation. The
Can I
proposed
ask
areas for discussion sort of
Mr. Chairman,
so
can
go
I
ahead.
ask a quick question just before you get
Of course.
into this, because I think it's important. Maybe you can work this into your discussion. So we have a list of kind of the issues that we want to discuss, and I think talked about last time about having an outcome about kind of what it is we want to do with those issues. I guess my fear is, and maybe this is what Mary Pauline was discussing, I don't want to have a Saturday where we just talk about issues, right? So what's the outcome? And maybe that's part of the guiding principles, maybe not, but maybe you can talk about that.
Sure, happy to. And actually, that is one of the things I wanted to talk about, although I use the phrase in my mind, sort of action plans. If we jump ahead to the end of the proposed agenda for the offsite, we have creation of action plan next steps. Now, that is not something where we're pontificating wildly amongst ourselves, stroking beards, staring out into the blue sky about, philosophical things. Yes, we want to be philosophically based, make sure that what we're talking about makes sense. But ultimately, what do we want to do? What are the things we want to do in each of this area? And so as we go through each of these topic areas, the question we need to be asking ourselves, and what I will do as we go through each of these conversation areas is, how would that manifest itself in an action plan? What kind of things would we put in a work plan for that? And so if commissioners want to think about an area beforehand, this is one of the reasons to do this beforehand, an area that of particular interest or things like that, what kind of things do you think we might want to do? We can discuss some of those a little bit earlier to sort of test drive a little bit, or of course during the Saturday conversation. But yes, the idea here is that this then becomes the outline of our work plan, our report. And in fact, what I don't want to do here is just talking about things, go to the Board of Supervisors in October and say, we now have a work plan, now we're going to get started. We're going to be able to do some things before October. So we'll juggle that. We certainly will be in touch with trial form. We have been already. We'll continue to be. So it's not like, and obviously, Mr. Basami and Rachel Flynn as well. It's not like we're off all by ourselves. There will be in communication with some important folks who have strong interest in what we're doing as we go forward. So once we come up with things we think we are ready to work on, let's get going.
Jeremy, and I'll kind of just throw in a little bit. As Mike mentioned, we have the action plan at the bottom of that, but that's not to say that we're not going to be discussing the next steps as we go over each issue. And remember, this is obviously a working draft, but I think the idea of having that as the last item is mainly to make sure that we come back around after we've discussed, theoretically, as we talk about each topic, we will be putting in what we hope to do with that, but that's where we're going to come back and maybe go over every item and make sure we didn't forget about creating the tasks as throughout the day.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that we want to talk about, now to a degree, but also as we go forward, because I know that having just sent this out a little bit ago, that you haven't had a chance to digest it yet. This is important, something we do want to think about. What I have here, what Mary Pauline and I put together, is a proposed sort of division of topics. The idea is that the list, when we're done, and I won't say we're done yet, really is sort of a map out all the things we're going to be interested in, go somewhere. And so whenever we've got a topic, it's in maybe it's a major legacy improvement, maybe it's a vehicle congestion mitigation issue. I've proposed a title here. We can talk a little bit about it tonight. We can certainly talk about it in the offsite. I've tried to get things, I hope, sort of integrative enough that we can be comfortable fairly soon, so we don't spend all our time talking about what the structure ought to be. But we'll talk about what we need to talk about and go through the conversation we need to go through. But ultimately, as we've done that, and I can point out some examples here. There are areas, and I do have one particular I'll just point out with the trails, sidewalks, and bicycles activity. 2 of our commissioners have already volunteered to become liaisons to that committee. And so there's opportunities for ownership here. Commissioners can say, I'd like to work in this area, this piece. It's a little bit like, when you're in an office, certainly when I was in the military, you'd have, 10 or 15 things that you were responsible for. We're not quite that exacting about it, but we are trying to be able to, identify stuff. And even if we don't want to work in something right away, that's important too. We know it's in the project circle that we want to get to eventually. Okay. To walk through those proposed areas, the major legacy infrastructure investments, in many respects, that's a lot of what we've been doing in the past. We'll get, and they're not all, infrastructure investments, I acknowledge, but certainly things like the Silver Line, I-66, 495, interchanges, BRT, Dulles. These are all big activities, many millions behind them and things like that, for which we are a smaller stakeholder, so to speak, or less influence, simply because these are things that the county board of supervisors already involved in, things like that. But certainly we want to make sure that we're not losing sight of these, and we're not losing opportunities to talk about them, to be aware of what's going on. That sort of oversight advice role is something we've always done, and we want to continue doing. The next topic I've discussed is vehicle congestion mitigation. There's a few things here, but transit-oriented development, making plans, as it were, as Rachel has talked about, transportation demand management, which, as you know, I've been very involved in. We've already had a conversation about that back in September. Delivery strategies, road design parameters. Rachel mentioned complete streets when she talked with us recently. Narrowing lanes. Alexis, I know you've talked about the 85% solution criteria. I'm throwing a lot of logs in the fire here. These are not designed to be a policy paper, but you can see this is the sort of thing I'm saying, this sort of looks like it would go here. Ultimately, looking very much for your inputs, if you agree with this, you got curbside management, things like that. Non-POV transportation, these are sort of phrases that I've come up with here. We might need to change them, but we can keep them if we want to. But things like Fairfax connector, taxis, Uber, micromobility, things like that. Trying to get out of cars, mobility out of cars, but not metro. That's your major infrastructure investment there. Trails, sidewalks, bikeways, active Fairfax, mobility devices, the extent to which we may want to do the county does scooters and things like that. Just pulling back a little bit from focus areas per se, strategies and policies, there's a boatload of them, and we may need to sort of look at the policies as policies. We might want to try and influence some of those policies. In fact, I'm sure we probably will at various points. Which ones and when, and what do we want to say and how do we feel about them? We can't spend a huge amount of time getting into the area, but certainly that's an area we want to be aware of, and it's also something that FCDOT, they've got a staff I know that track these sort of things already. New transportation technologies. This is some of the stuff that the Futures Working Group had spent some time working on. We're not going to become engineers, sorry, Eric. But then again, folks with engineering expertise, like say Eric, and others, help to sort of keep an eye on this sort of thing and maybe remind us periodically about things we might not have seen and might want to be aware of and stuff like that. Partnerships outreach, this is a bit more of a strategy piece here, and certainly it gets back to one of those guiding principles I mentioned about, and I've talked about this in our meetings, the broadening advocacy groups and the conversations and initiatives. There's a large number of groups here that we'll want to have different kinds of relationships with, and we want to have those relationships. And we can designate certain TAC members to be primary liaisons of various groups, however we choose to do. We can also decide where we're focused, where we're prioritized, and things like that. That to me comes out of knowing what it is you want to do. If we've identified some priority areas we want to focus on, that will in many respects tell you the kind of folks, kind of groups you need to work with to make that happen. break for lunch, continue the discussion of these areas. I didn't want to just sort of, recreate them here, and others if we've overlooked them. And then, as I've mentioned, and Ms. Miracolene also reminded us, okay, we've had the day here. What do we do next? Let's pull things together. And hopefully it's really compiling things from stuff we've already talked about. And that is not the time to start creating the plan. We'll be capturing those things we've already talked about earlier today. That's the idea. That's the hope. We've got here about 6 hours. It'd be a busy day, but that's what we're proposing, and wanted to get folks' initial impressions and see what you thought.
Would it be helpful, Mike and Mary Pauline, if maybe either here or offline, probably offline, strike out, add to, move around in these different categories of what we're interested in or what we think is productive for the group? Because it's obviously too much for one day. And I think in every category, we need to like winnow it down to one, maybe two, if not eliminating or combining some of these categories.
Well, and absolutely, this is a proposed division of activities, a division of topics. That's exactly the kind of thing we want to do. One thing I would like to do is I do want to have a master list somewhere that has everything, but that's not the action list. We can't want to try to move everything simultaneously. No, we can't do that. We may decide we'd like to move, and I'm projecting a little bit. We want to pick one priority in each topic area. Well, there might be two important things in one topic area. We can decide to work on two. But yes, we absolutely need to do that. So anybody, your thoughts and others are certainly welcome there. And please, I don't mean to imply that this is your only chance to look at, and that point we're going to run away and you'll see us next at the offsite. One of the things we can do is take another kind of this document with inputs. And all of the offsite itself and any work plan meeting we have, if we have one, those are all voluntary. We certainly can have a work plan meeting with 1, 2, 3, 4, however many commissioners have the stomach for it to actually go over this document, really dive into it. I'd be willing to do that.
And Alexis, for everyone, one thought I've had with this is to remember that we're not necessarily, yes, there's going to be some discussions about these subjects, but it's less about fixing them on this offsite meeting and more setting the priorities for addressing things. I mean, this action plan could theoretically be set up for the next 2 years with the idea that hopefully we're not going to have another weekend session in the near future. This gets us going enough that then we just have our Tuesday night work session separate from our meetings. So yes, it definitely looks like a lot, but if we keep in mind that we shouldn't so much be debating how to solve every issue, but more what issues we're supposed to focus on.
The menu to choose from, yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
Since I don't know historic, has this group had a plan that we can run as an example, not work or not?
Did not exist before.
Yeah, you're breaking it out, but heard enough to go no, we're breaking new ground. Mayor Pauline is right. We have periodically provided letters to the Board of Supervisors and things like that. And this is one thing that I've been talking about for a little bit. Certainly, the past 6-7 months here, as the structure of the TAC has changed, is that we know we want to be able to provide more focused support. So obviously, one of the things we look at, and Kevin, I know you've talked about this many times, is making sure that if there's something the Board of Supervisor, a supervisor wants us to look at, that we give that great weight as well, starting with, Mr. Alcorn. And so previously, another factor here is the bylaws. Our bylaws in the past were pretty generic, as most groups were. Now we've updated the bylaws. We haven't submitted them yet because I wanted to go through the through the offsite here and see if there's any changes you want to make. I talked to Mr. Bassani about it. I'm diverting for just a moment. Talked to Mr. Bassani about it. I'm going to look at the bylaws again. There might not necessarily be a need to hold it. We might just be able to let them go forward. But it's those bylaws that say, you know, you need to have a work plan, you need to report. So it's a higher level of expectation on boards and commissions, certainly more than this board or this commission has done in the past. There are some, the planning commission obviously, you know, has great demands on them. There's another group, I can't remember, who does a lot of work. So we're up in our game here, and we're conscious about it. We're also trying to do it in a way that is sustainable. Because if everybody recoils in horror and runs for the hills, then there's nobody left and we're not doing anything. So we're trying to balance all of those things.
Kelly, just to give you and any other new members a little bit of background, the bylaws that were just updated that haven't been submitted yet that Mike is mentioning, prior to these updates, the bylaws had not been updated. It was the original from the creation, so it was over 20 years old. So it really didn't have something like this for us to go back to reference, unfortunately. So.
By the way, Kelly, just asking, have we given you a copy of the bylaws? We can certainly make sure you got that so you can have a look at what's there.
Yeah, I read them.
Okay.
Yes, the other part of the question, boards, where we came up with a work plan because we were told by the board of supervisors that we need to have a work plan. So we chased our tails trying to come up with a work plan, and about the time we came up with something we thought was workable, a lot of the folks on the committee said, this isn't what I thought. Not only that, but then that board started sending more stuff to us, and so there's just way too many priorities were left. And I'm kind of in Jeremy's camp that if I'm going to a Saturday, I don't mind doing it if there's a real purpose and there's a real end game, and that whatever comes something useful. I don't want to be work for ourselves because the supervisors are not employing us their needs. So I realize that we must exist and that we have certain areas to think about, provide information on. I'm not going to go for ideas. So I'm just, I don't want to come off as who says, oh, I don't want to do this work because I don't mind working hard. I just want to be as needed.
I think most, if not all, commissioners would share that view. I'll let them speak, and hopefully that's the kind of thing they'll say. We'll see. Dean, I see you next. Looks.
Again, I'm probably like everybody in the room right now, and that is, I don't want to give up a Saturday. At the same time, as long as we accomplish something meaningful, then not a problem at all. But I know that my feeling is we have to try it, even if we fail. We need to have the time, do what we can to get this moving in the right direction. And I know, being on this committee now, I think 2 years. I like the way we're moving now, so I don't want to slow it down. So because I've really felt like a lot of my time was wasted before, quite frankly, and I think we have better meetings now. We get more work done. But I don't think we're perfect yet.
No.
Now I don't know, Mike, how you want this, but with your list of items that could happen, I already have two I'd like to put onto it.
Okay.
And I don't know where they would fit because I think they're really more legislative.
Okay.
But I could add that into the strategies, policies, and legislation.
Okay. One thing I'll mention, and Pete, you've just asked right here, and Alexis talked about it before. There's a few ways we can do it. We can get together as a group and talk if we feel we need to help shape, to make sure that Saturday that we're all contributing is worthwhile. I'm happy to have conversations. Mary Pauline, I'm sure will to a degree, and others. we can talk amongst ourselves in groups of two anytime. Ultimately, and this actually gets, I think, back, Kelly, to your point as well, and a little bit to Jonathan too, in terms of doing things that are effective here. We're putting things on paper. If you don't think it's what we need, speak up, say so, suggest what you think you should change. And if you're not sure, that's okay too. But if this isn't what we want, make it what we want. And we can. Control is too strong a word, but I think it's not necessarily a bad word to use. We're a volunteer group. We can do as much or as little as we want. We want to do a little more than we did before. We'll find out how much more we're able to. And I'm certainly happy to try and help lay some of the groundwork here, and Mary Pauline is as well too, to make the time we have, like these conversations and the Saturdays and things like that, more productive. So you can tell already, and this is not to pat ourselves on the back, but this is an example of the kind of things we're trying to do. That rather than just say, hey, come in on one Saturday, pick a Saturday, we'll come in and we'll just sort of talk. We have an agenda. We have areas to potentially focus on. We are going to write things down. And if at any point along that process, commissioners don't like the way we're going, please speak up. If it gets to be too much, speak up about that too. And part of my job here is to sort of try and take your temperature to sort of, push enough, but not so much that we're calling to run for the hills.
Okay. Not running yet.
Okay, there's still plenty of time to do that.
Yes.
But just on the sort of procedural basis there, please feel free to, and I encourage you, please, to take this document, just, mark it up, add stuff to it, add questions. Again, I'm happy to talk about it. One thing I'll have to do is, as you give comments back to me, it might not seem to fit, or I might have some other thoughts there. I'll get back to you. What I won't do is ignore your comments. You give me comments, we will address them, we'll discuss them. I'm not just going to ignore, particularly if they're hard. Because if they're hard, that means it's something we ought to be working on. And if the structure needs to be different, we'll change the structure. Again, don't want to spend too much time on that, but we've got to, I think, spending a little bit of time now having a solid foundation will give us the confidence and the ability to, reach up and change that light bulb if we know the ladder's not going to fall off from underneath us.
Just one specific, do you want us to pull this document up and basically track changes right into it?
That'd be fine.
Because it can do it that way, or just write a note saying, hey, add this, and leave it up to you guys.
I would like track changes just because they're easier to follow, and what exactly are you thinking about there? But feel free to add some comments as well. I did a report many years ago when I sent out a draft of it, and I got a lot of track changes and comments back. That became the report because, they corrected mistakes that I made. Oh, that's better. I'll use that instead. So yeah, please, I would like to have, those words there. And if there are areas where what I thought I was talking about didn't seem to come across, we can talk about that. If we've got commissioners, and this could very well happen, two different takes on the same thing. Well, that could be something I want to talk about too. If you feel it's an area you want to spend time on. There are some areas, if it's not that important, we might just agree to disagree. But now we've got a roadmap we can use to go through. And then when we actually focus on something, we can feel comfortable that it's worthy of our time. And we can explain to anybody who's looking over our shoulder, and there's at least 3 at the beginning that I mentioned, and there are others certainly, we have a public trust as well, to explain why we're working on this. We looked across the county, and this is where we decided to focus for whatever reason. And the fact that we have commissioners of particular interests and backgrounds is a perfectly legitimate reason to decide to pick something. We can do that.
Just wanted to know how you want to receive it.
Sorry, I always answer long. Sorry about that. You know, you learn how I am.
Not a problem.
Thank you for putting it together. I think it's good.
Jeremy, sorry, was that you or?
I was just saying thank you. Thank you for putting it together.
Yep.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm happy to hope it's helpful.
Pete, it's Kevin. Something kind of woke me up there when you said that the last 2 years were somewhat of a waste of time. Was that in
Oh,
topics
no.
or?
That's wrong words. And it hasn't been 2 years either. When I first got into the organization, I mean, I love presentations, but we really didn't seem to produce work. And I thought when I came into this that we would be producing more than learning. So I'm glad for the learning, but I just felt like we needed to do more. So, but no, not a waste of time. I've learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to this group continuing this work.
Perhaps, if I might add, because I can certainly say I felt this way, not waste of time, but unproductive use of my time would be where I felt. And I personally felt until we started redoing the bylaws, when we talked about things we wanted to do in the past, the answer always was, well, that's not in our bylaws. So until we started doing the revision, I had honestly considered leaving this because I didn't feel that it was a productive use.
Basically,
So at
yeah,
some
basically.
point, we would have a topic and we would produce answers or solutions, and a roadmap going forward. Is that the outcome we're looking for?
Well, if I could, there's one thing I do want to say here because, and I tried to make the point a little earlier, and I used as sort of the topic area these legacy infrastructure investments. A lot of what the TAG has done in the past are the kind of things that we'll want to be doing in the future as well. I certainly don't mean to imply, as I've tried to help put some of these things together, that the past was not productive, because it was. We did learn things, and I think one of the things we learned was that we can maybe act a little bit more, and part of that is the interests and the motivation levels of individual commissioners and abilities and schedules and all this other kind of stuff. So to me, and we can describe this differently, and we can make sure we don't sort of forget our legacy there. But that's what to me, that the encapsulation of the reviewing programs, reviewing efforts, providing inputs, providing suggestions. Those can still be valuable. And for certain large projects, we certainly do want to do that. We can't have our head in the clouds all the time and not be mindful of what's taking place. I will say, though, that one of the things that Chairman Alcorn said when we talked to him was that he wants us less in the day-to-day and more down the road a little bit. And one of the reasons is we got so many people doing the day-to-day. That's legitimate. We can't be away from the day-to-day completely. We have to balance all of that out as we go forward.
I would say I think that there's opportunities for both. I mean, for me, for someone who's been involved in trying to improve some of the transportation issues around our communities and hearing from other transportation community groups, the challenges that we have just trying to deal with slowing down traffic or creating safer ways for pedestrians to get around. Those are issues I think we should be involved in, and those are issues that are happening every day. And I think that's why it's important that we hear from not just county staff on what's happening, but from some of the community groups, which I was glad to see that as part of the plan.
Thank you. I agree completely.
Do we know why Jeff invited us to the BOS meeting in October?
The impression I get is that they're going through all the boards and commissions and saying, come on down and talk to us. There's been nothing transmitted to me that says, oh, and be prepared to talk about X or Y. Now, I know that conversation will come later, but since we're not going to be in that situation until October, we'll be well down the road in what we're doing. And I think that I'm probably not going too far out on a limb to suggest that we'll key in a large measure, not completely, but in a large measure off the kind of things that Mr. Alcorn will think is important.
And to add on, this is not, I don't know this for a fact, but based on some of the discussions I've had, part of this seemed where this is something that just kind of got pushed back because of COVID. If you recall, the board reached out, and while some of us had wanted to adjust the bylaws, we were specifically told to update the bylaws by the board, as were all the other commissions. And my impression had been that they had planned to do this roughly a year ago, and then COVID pushed this to the back burner.
It certainly would make sense, and I don't think we're certainly not going to be presenting our bylaws in October. That's so far down the road that we'll have submitted our bylaws long before then. So yeah, it's that's not our calling card, so to speak, in October.
No.
And I know that's not what you were implying,
Yeah.
but the extent to which that's what you're thinking, yeah, I think they just want to get us. They want to get us through and see us. And there's a lot of new supervisors as well. Large turnover there. So the time is right.
Mike,
Sorry, Pete, go ahead, and then next.
just, I don't know if this plays any part of it, but in talking with my supervisor, Dan Stork, apparently the board of supervisors is reviewing the whole idea of commissions and committees and everything else, and trying to find out whether or not they are relevant and whether or not they're doing anything. So I'm wondering if maybe one reason why we're being invited is one, and good for us, we'll actually show up. We might be invited to some degree to find out, what are you doing? And maybe it's a day for us to make sure we polish our shoes and make sure we're ready. Because something tells me that some of the commissions that they're invited, they won't be invited back again because they won't show up. So
that could be. And even if it weren't explicit, I think we're professional enough that we were just talking about it, for our own sense, as to whether it's worth our time to be involved or how much time we want to dedicate to it, depending on what we'd like to see coming out of it. It's appropriate, and I think we should expect the board of supervisors to be measuring us and seeing if they think we're worthwhile, and I welcome that, because if we're not, either we can't provide what they want, which I'd be very surprised, but it's ultimately their call, or we're not able to for whatever reason, then yeah, we should go away. But step back and think about it. Transportation, Fairfax County. I think there's a need for some citizens advisors here. So it's our job to try and make that as effective as we can. Or we can all be replaced, in which case, our weekends, our weekdays are all clear.
Mike?
Yes, go ahead. Is that Kelly?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Kind of the Kelly asking what this responded. It happens that the other members here, we might be able to understand. My sense is earlier is better because we have more time to work with it.
Mm-hmm.
But or date.
Kelly, I might suggest one thing I literally just sent to Calvin is I don't know that everyone's going to be able to respond to that survey right now because it's only set up to actually, if you notice, there's 6 slots for each date. So I just asked Calvin to adjust that. And then once that's adjusted, everyone would be able to put in their answers as to which date is best for them.
Everybody is sitting here and they could at least look at the and,
yes,
and say, I absolutely cannot March 6th or whatever. That starts me.
I don't mind spending some time talking about that, but I will also say, though, that another big factor is obviously going to be the availability of guest speakers. And so I need to reach out to them soon. Calvin will start that process tomorrow with the, reaching out to the Chairman Alcorn, et cetera, and seeing. So I think we absolutely, if we have a day, whichever day that might be, where we just can't get a good enough number of commissioners, we're not going to have the guest speakers coming in. So ultimately, the driver for this is us. And if it turns out we can't have guest speakers, and it's not working out, we have 1 or 2, or we just go solo. We can make it if we need to.
Is the work session a public meeting?
I believe it will be, but that's an excellent question.
That's a long YouTube video.
A very long YouTube video. You got to be really dedicated to the cause to look at that.
That's a good question for Calvin. If my memory serves correctly, we do not need minutes for work sessions, but I think they are still open to the public. But I'll let Calvin confirm that for us.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Just remember, anytime that we have two or more commissioners, talking together about transportation, it is a public meeting. I don't think that we need the minute, but Mike is really good about keeping notes and taking the minutes for the work session. Yeah.
Well, we'll certainly have notes, because if we don't keep notes, that kind of takes away the whole idea of an action plan.
Exactly. Hey, did you write that down? I thought you were writing that down. Oh, no.
But
Yes.
we don't necessarily need to keep all the details of our back and forth debate for the whole thing.
That's right. That's right. And when they do come out, and I have volunteered, and I think it's appropriate that I do so, sort of be the note taker, although obviously we'll welcome inputs and adjustments, etc. What I'll be doing is coming up with sort of the final results, the actions, this and that. I am not going to attempt to capture the blow-by-blow conversation. I can assure you of that.
Since it's
Yeah, it'll be virtual.
And my other question is, how many guest speakers is there for guest speakers to get to work? Unless those guest speakers are going to come in and say, hey, this is what I do, well, then
Legitimate question. And in fact, that's something that, anything on this agenda is open for attack discussion and change if the commissioners desire. But the idea is actually, and you see the topic, the way I've characterized it, things to think about, suggest attack priorities. And the people we've identified here, Walter Alcorn, Chair of the Board, Transportation Committee, Deputy County Executive Rachel Flynn, who, as we know, has plenty of ideas about transportation priorities and things like that. In fact, she has so many, and we've talked to her so often, we can talk to her at so various times, we might not need her to come, so to speak. But I know she'd welcome the chance to chat with us a little bit. Director Bitsani as well. And Dale Cashflow is someone who has a great, huge deal of experience. To remind folks, and Kelly, you might not know, because I think we were doing this as you were coming in, or maybe before, we decided to give the 2020 TAC Achievement Award to Dale Cashflow and the relay team that did the autonomous vehicle in the Mosaic District. Dale has been the head of, I think it was Loudon Transportation. So these are pretty self-directed folks, that, very directly applicable folks. I'd like the chance to sort of just have them give us their sort of strategic thoughts a little bit. And then, then it's up to us to roll up our sleeves and say, thank you, roll up our sleeves and get to it.
Looking at the first date is, that's less than a month away.
Mhm.
Which means if that was,
Sorry, what was that? You broke up?
Less than a month away, we have to have a certain number of commissioners say, yes, the third works for me, and we've got it lined up. I'm just saying, we keep down the road. People need to make a decision. Are you available 3 days? Let us know.
Well, absolutely. I think that, and again, I'm happy to talk for a little bit about the availability of the commissioners for those weeks. For my purposes, I have no weekend in there that is a red X for me. Mayor Plain, I know she's got one that's a problem. We can talk about that, but ultimately, we have to sort of lay this out with each of the guests as well. I will be honest, I think even the 13th is going to be hard to do. The 6th was impossible. We talked about that at first, sort of off to the side before this meeting. The 13th of February will be hard. But after that, I think 20 February through 13 March, all achievable there. And happy to put a little bit of focused effort into try and advance the outreach here. And really, we're sort of moving as fast as we can practically, but yes, we're trying to move things quickly. I acknowledge.
Calvin has updated the sign-up sheet, so maybe perhaps if either right now while we're on or before everyone goes to bed tonight, if we can have everyone do the sign-up tonight, and then that way we'll be able tomorrow to look at that and figure out what dates work best.
Absolutely, but again, one other factor is the availability of the guests. If it turns out we only have 2 weeks, let's say, where we get a good number of commissioners, then that's what we'll ask for. So we absolutely want the information, but I just want to be upfront that there's another factor there that we'll have to consider. And if our guests can't come within our time window, we go forward without them.
I just tried to sign up and it rejected. Said an error. But maybe maybe I used the old form. I didn't see one that had more than 6 slots.
So there were 2 emails he sent out. There was the email that was at roughly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Actually, I think either of them work at this point. I will say when I first clicked on it, I had an error as well. So perhaps close that and click on it one more time and see if that.
I'll give it a try.
Thank you. I think it's the same link, and I just updated, and I tested that the first time. I didn't have any error, but if you do it again, maybe it worked. Yeah.
Like I said, Pete, even I the first time had to close out. It gave me an error message, and then I re-clicked on it. So
I will try it again.
With my computer in precarious state, I'm not going to do it right now, but yes, I will set up here when we're done. I promise, Randall. Okay. Are there any other? Go ahead, Kelly.
I think
Sorry.
Kelly's trying to speak, just breaking out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Their mic's open.
I heard mic's open. So, okay. Any other observations, questions there? Welcome inputs, as we say. I think I know the answer to this emotionally, but let me ask practically. What are folks' thoughts about perhaps having a work session maybe on February the 2nd to shape the agenda a little further? I know folks will be reluctant. I'm reluctant too, and Mary Pauline is as well. She, wants to make sure we don't do that. But I did just want to ask now, what folks' thoughts are. If it looks like I think we might be productive, issues we might want to resolve, or don't even bother thinking about it. We'll just find another way to work through things and come to the offsite.
Just a thought, and that is, we could have a work session for anybody who wants to show up, quite frankly. And if it's only 2 people, then it's not really a meeting or anything else. But if 4 showed up, then at least you have the mechanism to have 4 people. So, but I tried again to sign up again, and another error. But I just for the record, anything but February 13th, that's my daughter's birthday, so can't do that.
Okay.
All right.
Good suggestion. We talked about it before, but good suggestion to do the work session for folks who might be interested in doing it. So
yep.
That'll be a self-selected group. None of this is mandatory, of course. So, but we'll let folks know.
Okay.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, please sign up for available times for the offsite, and please send. I think you're going to have to send them to me and Calvin, because as soon as you include Mary Pauline, now we're working because we're sending information. We'll get it to you. Once it's to Calvin, then we money launder, then we can include you. So we'll get it to you. So any comments on the paper, please send them to me and Calvin, as I say, as quick as you can, because we're just trying to structure the thing here. And what I'll do is I will tentatively think about sort of reporting back, as it were, maybe in a work session or something like that by about February 2nd, so you can see where we're at. Okay, any other comments or questions there before we move on? Okay, all right, we're actually doing pretty good on the calendar. I think for the very first time, we're ahead of schedule here. And since we don't have a executive session, hopefully we can maybe finish a little early. That would be nice. I do have a couple of things to mention for the chair's report here. First, and I don't have a big report on this because I was not able to listen in for much of it, but the Board Transportation Committee did meet on January 12th. They talked about countywide pedestrian bicycle safety initiative update, which is oh, there it is. I'm sorry. The bicycle safety initiative, and then active Fairfax was the other thing. I thought that was got confusion out there. They did have the active Fairfax transportation plan update. Chris Wells, Nicole Wyams, who came and talked to us. That presentation was given on the 12th, and also they talked very briefly about Silver Line Phase 2, because the other topics pretty much took up most of the conversation. I'm sorry I can't give you a report, but of course the results of the meeting are on the county website if you choose to have a look at it.
Mike, a couple of comments on that.
Sure.
I did try to watch as much of that as I could. The two things. One, Supervisor Harity's comment that the board should be mindful of not putting too many items that need funding on their plate, because there's a limited amount of funding available for projects. I think he was talking in particular about maybe lighting of trails. The second thing, and Alexis, I wanted to make sure that you caught this, under the Silver Line, under Martha's update on that, there was an item on bus transportation in lower income communities. So as we get to the topic that I thought was going to be tonight, that maybe next month, either staff or anybody representing that study, I think they should be included on our topic there on bus transportation that we're looking at.
Kevin, who did that study, by the way?
I don't know if Calvin knows or not, but it was on the presentation. She didn't talk to it at all. It's just noted on there that somebody's doing a study on bus transportation for the Silver Line. I think for the Silver Line stops.
Okay.
And I think it specifically mentioned lower income. I mean, it would take me a minute to pull it up, but it's in the handout for the BTC.
But is it the Silver Line Phase 2 implementation section?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that, because I watched most of the meeting, but I didn't catch that bit.
Well, they only had about 5 minutes at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, they scooted right through that, so they might not have really done that yet.
If you look on the handout or the presentation, Alexis, I think it's the next to the last page on the Silver Line. You'll see there's just a line or two on the bus transportation.
Okay. Appreciate that, Kevin. Appreciate it very much. Oh, Calvin's starting to show us some content.
There we go. We have it up. Somebody was kind enough to pull that up.
That would be Calvin, of course. Thank you, Calvin.
So it's under Title VI analysis at the bottom left.
Okay.
If everybody can see that.
Calvin, do you know offhand perhaps who's doing that in FCDOT? Would that be the Fairfax Connector folks?
Mr. Chairman, this is Brent Riddle. Since I handled.
Oh, Brent, yes.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries.
I think I can answer this question for you. Since I handled Title VI for DOT. It's actually the Transit Services Division group. So Dwayne Pelfrey and his team that are working on the Title VI analyses for the proposed new routes that will interact with the new Silver Line Phase 2 stations when they open.
Okay.
So, but unfortunately, I don't have any, I'm not sure exactly where they are, and I don't know what the results, if there are any results yet, but I do know that that's what they're working on.
Well, that's good. At least you've got a trail of breadcrumbs, which helps.
But if you need more information, I can track it down for you. That's not a problem.
Okay.
Well, Jeff, or Mike, rather, when we have this meeting, I mean, should somebody from that group then, also be invited?
I think it makes sense. That's what I was asking, finding a name there. We're going to, we can dive into the conversation right now about next month's meeting, but I was going to talk about that here in just a minute because it's the next item on the agenda. In fact, why don't we go ahead and do that? I've got just a couple of small things that I'll talk about afterwards. Alexis and Kevin, provided a good deal of inputs regarding the proposed topic that we've been trying to have here in January for the One Fairfax and the serving the lower socioeconomic riders there. As I said in the beginning, we weren't able to do that this month because we weren't able to get Fairfax Connect. Tom Pizzani is going to, they are able to come next week. Tom will join them. I will, Alexis, I will launch you here and appreciate your efforts to help sort of shape that agenda. I asked Alexis, please, to do a little bit of research there to sort of look at the One Fairfax activities, look at the Fairfax Connect stuff, make sure we've got sort of a coherent story a little bit there. I think, quite honestly, Alexis, if you're willing, I'm putting you on the spot. I hate to do it, but sorry. Is maybe reaching out to Dwayne Pelfrey as well. Don't have to do a huge amount of research. I think we know kind of what we want to talk about, and we've done very well in the past, getting close to the mark, having folks come, and we learn as we go through. But I would definitely support having the Title VI folks come in, but I also defer to Alexis, who's giving us more thought than I am, certainly in terms of how the pieces fit together. But Kevin, your suggestion in this whole area has been a good one, and so I would expect so. But if as Alexis looks at it, there's some reason not to, I wouldn't want to sort of require her or obligate her to, but it certainly seems to make some sense. So with all that run up, Alexis, what do you think?
Well, with the One Fairfax policy and what I've been trying to understand about it, one thing I worry about is that it steps us into the territory of what we were just talking about of just learning, understanding. There's no real action item. But that's also where I find myself with the policy and how the TAC interacts with it. I want to understand more about it. I want to understand where should we be looking for the blind spots or the places where we think the county should be doing more to serve the populations that it's intended to serve. So it steps us back into that learning, understanding realm versus the actionable part of it. So I feel like it's kind of in this weird spot of, we're trying to develop an action plan and where we go, but it's also a very conceptual thing that touches every piece of policy that the county deals with.
Well, I appreciate that, and very glad to hear you being incorporating this as you go forward, because we are we're trying to be spring-loaded to action. But if we don't think about what we're doing, if we don't know what we're doing, we'll just run off and get run into the street and get hit by a bus, so to speak. And quite honestly, the presentation we had today about economic development not strictly actionable by us today. But I think something very good for us to know about, and knowing about what more about what Fairfax would be good. But honestly, Alexis, this is a big part of the reason I'm glad you're looking at this here. Is how much do you think we need to know about this to be aware of the environment enough so we're not stepping up blindly and doing things thoughtlessly without all of us becoming one Fairfax experts, which you said and we know we can't do.
And I know that the Fairfax Connector is starting to look at their 10-year strategic plan again. And yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we do have an understanding of what these policies mean, because, the connector saying we want to change this bus route or change the frequency to us, might mean nothing or might be negligible, but it is very important to the people who are on that line. So.
Well, and I also want to, reminds me of something I want to be, careful about too. I'm not asking you to sort of become our TAC expert on buses and One Fairfax and learn all about it prior to putting it on the agenda. We learn these things together. It's important for you to help guide us close to the target. But then at that point, that's why we have the conversations. If it turns out, and I'm not presuming any outcomes here, if you really like this area, you really want to get into it, and you want to dive right in, I'm sure we can find a way to accommodate that and build around your interest in doing that. Just as we need to find ways to build around the interests of other commissioners who want to look at areas too. That's that interest area I talked about there. So I know you're doing this very responsibly, Alexis. Really appreciate it. But don't feel you have to go too far. Get us close enough so it's a productive conversation. I'm already sure we're on the 5-yard line there already, just with the stuff you've done so far. Title VI as well certainly makes sense. It helps to know kind of things to look out for, but please do not think you've got to be the expert and do more work than necessary. We want to save those kind of efforts for things that, are really, really going to be important.
Thank you.
Mike,
yes.
I'm your contrarian going forward, but for this, I just want to, this is my intention, is just to ask some pointed questions about how they're covering this population, to make sure that they are, if they're not providing the service, that they know that they're not providing the service, and what are they going to do about it? I don't feel it's our job to tell them or to solve it for them. They're the experts. But I would like to be educated on what they're doing about it. And if in the course of having that meeting, say it next month, we can make some suggestions or point out where they think they're falling short, that's my mission. And then, I'm kind of done and we're on to the next topic. So.
Yes, and I will say that when I talked to Tom about this, he pointed out that the Fairfax Connector has done some things in this area. It did maintain service, and that other bus services cut back their service quite a bit. The Fairfax Connector did not. So Tom believes, and I'm sure he's accurate, right? Of course, that the connector has a good story to tell. So hopefully, Kevin, I'll sort of use your phraseology there. They can pass your test. That you'll be satisfied with with what they've done. I think it's an opportunity to learn a little bit more, and we have to learn at least a little bit more to be able to sort of judge is a little strong, but that is kind of what we do as we look at all these things. Do we think it's being done okay? Now, that's not our job to design everything, although we can, at some point, if we really think something's important, we can get involved in things. But for us to be able to raise concerns or perhaps decide to take action, I'm not presuming we want to do that in this case, but I suspect we will perhaps in other areas, to be comfortable enough and confident enough in our knowledge of what's going on that we can engage in a legitimate dialogue, that we can ask the right kinds of questions, understand the answers when they come back, see if we're satisfied, I'll use that word, and then determine what we want to do. And the answer could always be nothing for a variety of reasons. But this gets back to the thing comment I made to the TAC before, is that, we willingly act on things when the TAC decides to do that. We're not going to just sort of, go off as a group without us being together.
If nothing else, I hope that whether it's the bus service or any other topic that we look at, that as a group of privileged people, that we're always considering the vast array of different backgrounds and different points of view. That, I think that's really extremely important, especially in this day and age, to always have that in the back of our minds, that we're not just speaking for ourselves, for what we've seen or what we feel or what we think, but putting ourselves in other people's shoes.
Fair point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that's, I'm not going to speak for you, but I mean, it's obvious that's why I wanted to talk about it, is make sure that the folks that need the service are getting it. And that's important. That's one, and it was with this very much in mind, that I put the principle there, looking at different complex of issues, different demographics and economic views and things like that. Not very artfully worded, but yes, we need to be looking at all county residents, all issues, and be as holistic as we can. It's going to be hard. Eventually, we're going to have to pick areas, but at least understand that we got to try and touch a lot of these things. Let's be aware of them. Okay.
On this point, I don't know who said it, but it was a great idea. But where we invite maybe some groups, community groups here, when we hear of an issue, bus line, whatever we're working on, and maybe ask some to participate in and give us their input, so that we stay in touch with all the communities. So that just seemed like a good way to maybe refresh our feelings when it comes to, and our thoughts, as to keep us on track to represent everybody. So, but I forget who said it, but I thought it was very brilliant.
I know Jonathan talked about this. It's embedded in some of the things that we've talked about. And certainly, we discussed having advocacy groups and outside groups participate in our meetings, and as not quite colleagues, but certainly partners in what we're doing here. We could conceivably do that here in February. We'd want to be careful about who we're inviting and sort of get that thing rolling. My preference would be, if possible, to sort of do that after the offsite, so we have a better sense of how we want to do it and what our strategies are, stuff like that. But where that comes home to roost for this issue here, and potentially others, is yes, we can invite folks to come join us. We can go out and talk to folks too. That's more time. That's more effort on the part of commissioners. We'll never hold commissioners back. I certainly don't want to base our strategy for achievement on all commissioners going out to 3 or 4 community meetings a month. That's not sustainable. We're not going to do that. I know that's not what you're talking about, but anywhere in that spectrum we can do that, and this could be a topic we decide to do some outreach in. That's perfectly legitimate as well too. Okay, I think we've talked about next month's meeting. We already, unusual for us, but fortunate, maybe try and do more of this if we can. We'll see how things go. We have a commitment from Mr. Bassani and Fairfax Connector to come in February. Alexis, from talking to Carla and One Fairfax, also is available in February. Title VI, easy to see. We're certainly not going to not do the meeting if Title VI folks can't come. I think it's appropriate to invite them, even just to sit in. So that's our agenda next week. I'm sure next month. It will probably be, I won't guarantee it, but probably be before our offsite, but it could be a few days before. So there might be some offsite planning conversations there as well too. I'm always on the lookout for other topics. You know, talking with transportation aids. We've talked about Uber, Lyft, and V and things like that. Fairfax connector, etc. I'm not looking to add anything else to February's agenda because I think this topic will be robust enough that we could spend a good deal of time on it. And particularly with potentially a work session and certainly the offsite coming soon, I don't want to just keep loading this up and loading this up with more and more stuff to do. There'll be plenty of that as we go forward. Okay, so we comfortable for February there? Sounds good. I think we're good to go. Okay, so back to sort of the chair's report there. I had mentioned previously the connected DMV effort for transportation and management. I think I also mentioned at the last meeting that they started to do some things with flexible work. Sorry, what were they talking about at the time? Basically, I think you even talked about it back then. Flexible work and recovery agreement. What Connected DMV has done, the Greater Washington Board of Trade has put together a plan. They've tried. They're encouraging companies and groups that have people employed, potentially including government, but that's not where the focus tried to start. On an agreement to sort of continue teleworking. Great idea. I was reviewing it a little bit last night as I was putting some things together for the meeting, and realized, ooh, I should talk to Anna Nissen. So I sent her a copy of the package yesterday. So she's not had a chance to get back to us yet. There won't necessarily be an action, although we could decide to perhaps endorse their activity. No action here this evening because I'm not presenting any papers, and I certainly want to get Anna's views on the matter, and if need be, give Tom an opportunity to weigh in as well too, if it is his choice to do so. I did want to mention that, and certainly I think that at some point during this year, sooner rather than later, I'll want to pull together a work session on transportation demand management. The rules of those work sessions will be, as Pete articulated, come if you want. And as many as folks come as can come. It's only two. Whew, don't have to do notes. If it's more than that, we'll do what we've got to do. I mentioned the national landing and the transportation stuff there. One thing I'll also mention, another article that I noticed, and I'll send this to Calvin to send out to folks. The Transportation Secretary designee, Pete Buttigieg, apparently one of his things that he was doing in South Bend was complete streets. And so he comes with some background in the area. I know it looks like he'll be buttressed by former head of the New York Transportation Authority. Not sure exactly, I could have her title wrong, but somebody who has a great deal of experience in the area. And so Rachel actually forwarded me some information about that. And her first thought is, let's have the secretary come talk to us. That'd be great. Not for our offsite, maybe down the road, maybe the board of supervisors first, but certainly another example of the kind of things we're looking at are being looked at in other places as well too. So that's that's encouraging. And the last thing I mentioned, just a couple of administrative things. We will the TAC award usually was presented at the board of supervisors meeting. I don't want to wait till October. We may decide to wait till October, but we are going to go forward with bestowing the TAC award on the relay group as we've decided in the past. And so Calvin and I are working the logistics for that, the plaque and various things like that, and we'll figure out exactly how we're doing it. We may need to do it virtually. We may be able to do it virtually with the board meeting. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we're going forward with that. The last thing I'll mention in my area there is the Lifetime Achievement Award. I did get a chance to talk. I wanted to talk to David Skiles before reaching out to Kathy Smith. I was able to do that, but I've not heard back from David. Just want to be respectful of everybody's positions in the matter. We don't expect any challenges there, and we do fully intend to award the Lifetime Achievement Award to our esteemed former chair, Jeff Barnes, at our the earliest opportunity. So that's what I have. Any questions?
We sent the letters gone out yet for the?
No.
Okay.
No,
For the, all right. So that's still on the plate. Okay.
It is, and I will just say, Roger, I appreciate you putting some of those letters together. I want them to be a little bit more personal, and I haven't had time to really add to them. But honestly, I'll take advantage of this, particularly knowing Jeff as well as you do. If there's some personal anecdotes or a couple sentences or half a paragraph or even a paragraph, Kevin, I would welcome the inputs there to make sure we get some of the right stuff there, because we want to do a nice letter. We don't want to just do some boilerplate. I think Jeff deserves more than that.
If you send me what you have, I'd be happy to look at it, see if I think of anything else, and just send it back to you.
Okay, that's
of any help.
I will do so. Thanks. Okay, that's what I have, and so now we're left to commissioners' updates. And so what I'll do is, because the screen jumps all around, I'm going to go through our original list, if I can find it here. Here it is, and go through in order and see if anybody has some last things to add. Let's see, Kevin, you're first on the list. Anything to add?
You caught my attention there with the incoming Secretary of Transportation.
Yes.
And I would just say, complete streets, I'm sure if that's his background, but I think I would guess there's a huge mandate there for infrastructure. It still sticks in my mind the day Elaine Chao came out of the elevator at Trump Tower in New York, which was supposed to be, I think, going to be on infrastructure.
Yeah.
And it just fell apart with Charlottesville. And it never, since then,
never
I
recovered.
don't think he ever had never recovered. So I think the next 4 years will be a big push on infrastructure, and I think we certainly need it. So more of an editorial comment than anything, but that's all I have.
Okay. Well, I will just add, though, that one of our topic areas that we talked about is major infrastructure investments. Could be all the more important, because we might have opportunities to look at more things we might have than we've been looking in the past few years for just that reason. So, yeah, I copy. Okay. Anything else, Kevin? Okay. Me, I've talked enough, as I always do. Kelly? Anything to add? Okay. Take that as she's comfortable. Roger, anything you'd like to add? You good?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Pete Zednick.
Short report. Let me turn me back on again.
Okay.
There you go. I attended my first trail, sidewalk, and bikeway meeting on January 13. Did the normal introductions and such, but it found that it was probably a good linkage for transportation to work out with them, because they were doing Route 1 safety study and we're talking about things about complete streets, a lot of the stuff we are now considering.
Okay.
So I thought that was great. Their representative, Jim Klein, would like to attend one of ours sometime soon. Just so we all know how it went, I was treated nicely, but as a guest, so I had to wait till the guest time and do my conversation. So that's how I was fit in.
Okay.
And but Jim would like to be invited.
Okay. Okay.
I could keep him informed as to what we're talking about and see if he's interested, and then hook him up if that's good.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. And I think we might be able to allow him to participate more in the conversation than apparently you were when you visited. So, although he can't, so he's going to take it over.
Yeah. No, he's a good guy. He knows who he's talking about with the bikes, and he could definitely bring us up. And we did also that evening talk about Active Fairfax and the impacts and all that good stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I will just take advantage of this to mention here is that particularly, you and Alexis, sort of our liaisons to that group there, and Pete, I think you sort of, got in line first, so to speak there.
Yeah.
Help suggest to us when you think is a good time. Yes, we'll talk about it here. You and I can talk about it. We can talk about it as a commission if we need to and stuff like that. But that's exactly the kind of thing we welcome your guidance on. Is now's a good time because you'll know what happening over in the group, and we can adjust our schedule a little bit if there's something they're doing with complete streets or something like that, and we'll be doing some of that stuff sooner rather than later, I expect. We absolutely can look at joint meetings or something like that. So think about that kind of stuff and give us some suggestions, and we'd be happy to look at anything that makes sense.
Okay, and just so you know, to me, the biggest tie-in with the actual trails is they're doing the regional, what they're calling the major transportation trails in the area. That they're working on those at this time.
Okay.
And I believe that will tie in nicely with transportation. All the small ones are good too, but the big trails, where they're going to be 12-foot wide and all, those ones that may have our interest.
Absolutely. Makes sense. Okay. Anything else, Pete? Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Alexis, your turn.
I'll echo what Pete said. The active Fairfax plan is about to start hitting the streets for public input pretty soon. So just something to be aware of. And maybe at some point in the next few months, we'll want to hear from them directly. And the only other thing I'll mention to Kevin is it's always infrastructure week. If you've heard the joke.
And Pete, I'll say quickly to you, to paraphrase from Dirty Dancing, if you're going back to the trails meeting, nobody puts our Pete Sitnick in a corner. So get off of the guest list.
It's an outrage. Jeremy.
Yeah, briefly, I'll have Calvin share it, but there was a study that came out within our community on the Shreve Road. I think it's worthwhile. It's like 200 pages, so I don't know that most people want to read that much, but it's I think it's a study that we did with VDOT, and FCDOT was involved too. VDOT hired a third party consultant to do a study, but I think it's interesting for all of you in that it kind of reviews some of the community recommendations and then talks about why that's not possible. Because we hear a lot, why can't you put a stop sign? Why can't you put a speed radar? And there is some discussion within that about why they decided not to move forward with certain recommendations. It's also encouraging in that there's some pretty bold recommendations that are in there, like there's multiple roundabouts ago. It's really kind of trying to address the balance of pedestrians, multimodal transportation, and vehicles. I think Shreve Road that it's studied, I think is maybe the only road in Fairfax County partially where they've reduced the speed limit. So there's some discussion in that. So I wanted to share that with all of you. I don't know how, there's a lot of infrastructure recommendations. I don't know that we'll ever get to that point, but there's some discussion about some short-term efforts that they made, like temporary beacons at the bike trail. So things that didn't cost a lot of money that they had on hand that they were able to implement fairly quickly. And I'll just say, in general, I think the issues that we had there are issues that we see across the county. Supervisor Palchik had a community meeting on regard to Blake Lane. It may have been a child on a bike that got hit in a crosswalk across from Blake Lane. But what we hear across the community is people just want cars to slow down. And the response that we hear is we need lots of infrastructure to make the car slow down. And which as you all know, it takes decades to actually get to that point. And so I hopefully it's something within these two studies and other areas. I know it's not just an issue in the Providence district, but I think it's something that we can take a look at.
Absolutely, and to create a phrase, maybe it helps with sort of incomplete streets as we're trying to get to complete streets. So that's a good point, Jeremy. I appreciate you mentioning that. Okay. Anything else?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Kelly, I see you're on now. I called your name earlier. Do you have anything you'd like to add at the end here?
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say.
Okay.
Challenges and I'm going to go buy a new computer on my phone all day. I'm not sure. So I just so I looked checked out for I can sustain. I'm not interested. It's that you're quite limited in what I can do. A lot of feedback. Told Pauline, I'm not going to go buy
Kelly,
that's okay. I can a meeting.
Kelly, I'm sorry, and Mike, but I've had trouble hearing Kelly all night.
I have.
Yeah.
Is anybody else having that, or is it just my?
No, I'm having trouble too. I will admit. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. I can't quite hear what you were saying.
Okay.
You're muted, Mary Pauline.
Thank you. What Kelly was trying to explain was that she's having technology issues. Her computer does not work with WebEx. And she's been doing this meeting from her phone.
Okay.
And she's not wanting to have to go buy a new computer for a volunteer commission.
Understood. Thank you for that.
So it's not, and to, if I'm not repeating her correctly, I apologize, Kelly, but she was saying that it's not that she's not interested, it's that she's having frustrations with this right now.
Understood. Thanks for that, Mary Pauline.
Yeah. Calvin, let's talk offline, see if there, I mean, I don't know if there's anything, but if the county can do something. I think maybe Kelly, you were sort of doing this too, I could be wrong, but just accommodations. I mean, the county needs to make sometimes accommodation. Maybe there's something we can do. I don't know. But hopefully your technical situation would not be a complete impediment. I see some frustration there and I can appreciate it.
And a set of headphones just like this can make a big difference with the sound quality. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. I put my phone at board to the computer, so that's not the issue. The computer just pretend. It just doesn't make any sense to me from a rational point of view of research. I think greater, this commission was trying to who are actually attend every phone, tutor middle schooler, and so I mean it's everywhere in order to, but a huge if this commission than white income. So it doesn't think of the bigger picture of life that so to work on my end to work some I don't need the money to provide a laptop for me. I can probably move. Being very frustrated by all of this. So.
Kelly, one thing that this doesn't necessarily relate to the off-site work session that we've discussed, but in terms of the general meetings, I don't know if you've missed that we don't necessarily have to participate through the WebEx. There is the phone dial-in which while you don't necessarily see everything, you're able to participate that way as well. And then on your own, on your phone, all of the documents are provided as well, and you'd be able to see it that way to maybe alleviate some of the frustration of having to do the WebEx itself.
Yeah, but it's a good point though about accessibility. The county has chosen WebEx. I don't know the criteria, exactly, but I'm sure no matter which they choose, there would be some, different challenges for connection there. Good idea, Mary Pauline, perhaps, watch on your phone and speak on another phone or something like that. It's not optimal, but, Kelly, recognize that, you figure out how to do it there. I hope this doesn't, have your frustration level rise to an area that you feel you can't participate. We want to make sure that we do everything we can on our side to, make you feel welcome and participate. But I can certainly understand and appreciate why you're frustrated today. I would be too. So I think right now, Kelly, the ball is sort of in your court, but Kelly, we do need to think about wider connectivity issues. Kelly wouldn't be the last person that would have trouble connecting up here, and we need to be mindful of that as well too. So okay. Let's see. The next is Eric Theo. Eric, do you have anything to add?
Nothing significant to report at this time.
Sounds good. I don't believe David has joined us. And so, Mary Pauline, this gives you the final word, other than when calling for adjournment.
I think I talked enough as well, so I will just move that we adjourn.
Any seconds?
Second.
There we go. We have most of the floor to adjourn. That has been seconded. All those in favor of adjourning say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. There better not be anybody. Motion carries unanimously. We're adjourned at 10:05. Thanks very much, everyone, for your participation. Look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay.